This conference will now be recorded.
So thank you so much to everybody who came to this. As I started to experience more of the social distancing, I realized that I was feeling two things. First of all, I was feeling isolated from the people that I care about. And second of all, I was feeling like I didn't even know what I didn't know. And when I stopped to think about those people that I was missing, I started to realize how much they know. So I decided to put together a couple of sessions calling on people that I know from the jujitsu world, but who have expertise in other areas as well. And I'm really happy that Stephanie Mensing agreed to chat with me, to chat with us. She is an employment attorney and she's a member of the New Jersey and the Pennsylvania Bar Associations. And she's going to chat with us about legislation that is passing, legislation that already exists, and how that relates to COVID-19 for employers and employees. So, Stephanie, I'm going to ask you to take it away. Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. As everybody's probably aware, business closures and stay-at-home orders are now in effect. That's affecting workers all over the U.S. In Pennsylvania, the governor's ordered all non-life sustaining businesses to close. In Philadelphia, there's a stay-at-home order in place. In New Jersey, there's a stay-at-home order in place. And the governor's also closed all non-essential retail businesses in New Jersey. These business closures and stay-at-home orders, along with people getting sick from the coronavirus, are already and will continue to have a significant impact on workers. And unfortunately, no one knows how long this is going to last. The various governments, local, state, and federal governments have sort of been scrambling to provide some relief to workers. There are some states that already had pretty good sick leave laws and some did not. I'm going to talk about relief that's available to workers who are impacted by the coronavirus. It's really sort of unprecedented what's happening because it affects everyone in the US and a lot of employment attorneys on both sides, those who advise employers and those who advise employees, have sort of been scrambling over the last week to understand these laws. There's a lot of confusion, and I'm sure there are going to be a lot of companies that mess things up because there's a lot of uncertainty. So it's going to take a little bit of time to sort things out. Unfortunately, I can't give anyone any specific legal advice, but at the end, I can certainly answer some hypothetical questions that anyone has. The first and probably the biggest change is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which is a federal law. It goes into effect on April 2nd, but it has a sunset date of December 31st. So this is very temporary relief for employees. And there's two main parts of it. There's paid family and medical leave, and there's paid sick leave. And it sounds pretty simple, but it's actually like pretty complicated. It's about a 90-page bill. So I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. Very generally, the act provides that covered employers must provide all employees 2 weeks, so that's up to 80 hours, of expanded family and medical leave at the employee's regular rate of pay, where the employee is unable to work because the employee is quarantined. And that's an official quarantine, whether it's federal, state, or local order or advice of a healthcare provider, or if the employee is experiencing coronavirus symptoms and seeking a medical diagnosis, or 2 weeks, again, up to 80 hours of expanded family and medical leave at 2/3 the employee's rate of pay, because the employee is unable to work because of a bona fide need to care for an individual subject to quarantine, or care for a child whose school or child care provider is closed or unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19, and or the employee is experiencing a substantially similar condition. And I'm going to leave off the rest because it's it's a very gray area. But if there's a substantially similar condition, so quarantine, caring for a child, that would fall into that. It wouldn't be a federal law without some sort of gray area. So that applies to all employees. That's regardless of how long the employee has worked. Now, the next part of this is that employees who have been employed for at least 30 days get up to an additional 10 weeks of expanded family and medical leave at 2/3 the employee's regular rate of pay, where the employee is unable to work due to a bona fide, that's a legal term that basically means legit, need for leave to care for a child whose school or child care provider is closed or unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19. Now, this act does not apply to every employer. It applies to certain public employers, and it applies to private employers with less than 500 employees. It does not apply to companies that provide health services. Their healthcare providers or emergency responders can elect to exclude employees from eligibility. Now, you're probably thinking, about small businesses, mom and pop businesses. There is an exemption. Employers that have less than 50 employees may be exempt if the requirements would jeopardize the viability of the business. And that's, again, it's sort of a gray area about what that means, but employers that have less than 50 employees can apply to the DOL for an exemption. There's also, it's worth noting, a tax credit. It's a dollar for dollar tax credit, and I'm not very familiar with how it works, but I know it's not a tax credit that people have to apply for a year from now. It's a tax credit that employers can apply for, I believe, coming right out of payroll taxes. And I think employers who don't have a balance can actually get an advance from the IRS to cover the leave. But it's a dollar for dollar tax credit. So that will certainly help out small businesses. But again, small businesses that have less than 50 employees may be exempt. And I've talked about what employees are eligible, but I just want to go over that again. All employees are eligible for 2 weeks, and then employees who've been employed for at least 30 days are eligible for up to an additional 10 weeks. And that's to care for a child under certain circumstances. Now, there are caps. It gets a little complicated here, so I'm going to try to make it simple. The caps are for family leave, it's $200 a day or $10,000 altogether. For sick leave, it's $511 a day and $5,110 altogether. And that's for, again, sick leave, for illness or quarantine. And then for any other COVID-19 qualifying reasons, such as a school closure, it's $200 a day and then $2,000 altogether. Again, it gets a little complicated, but the important thing is just to know that the act exists. It goes into effect in April, and it provides all employees, with 2 weeks, and then employees who've been employed for 30 days get the additional 10 weeks.
Stephanie, can you?
Oh,
Stephanie,
sure.
sorry to interrupt you. Can you please say the name of the act again, the law?
Sure. It's the Families First Coronavirus Response Act.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it's federal law, so this applies to everyone regardless of what state that they're in. And there is some protection for employees, and this assumes that there's a job to go back to. As I'll get into, there are a lot of businesses that are going to close or they're going to have to lay employees off. But there is some protection. Again, assuming there's a job to go back to, employers can't discriminate against someone or retaliate against someone because they take this leave or because they file a complaint because they were denied leave or for another reason related to the act. One important thing to note, as I mentioned, there's a sunset date. So paid sick time under this act does not carry over into 2021. And if an employee is terminated, resigns, is laid off, the employee is not entitled to be paid for any unused leave under the act. So that's really the biggest change, because this is brand new. The president just signed it, I think, on Monday. It went through a few versions, and it's effective April 2nd. The probably one of the biggest things to hit employees that are employed in Philadelphia. So this only applies to Philadelphia right here. Philadelphia has what's called the sick leave law. It's actually, technically, it's called the Promoting Healthy Family and Workplaces Act, but it's known as the sick leave law. And under the sick leave law, employees who work for companies that have 9 or more employees accrue 1 hour of sick time for every 40 hours worked, up to 40 hours per year. Employees who work for smaller companies can accrue up to 5 days of unpaid leave. So this has already been in place for a few years, but last week the city temporarily expanded the sick leave law to allow workers to use their paid sick leave for COVID-19 business closures, quarantine, and to stay home with their children during school closures. So this is a form of for people who work for large enough employers of paid leave. And this is in addition to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And again, this is temporary, so this, I believe, expires at the end of the year. Now, one thing I want to point out, because this is a change, the expanded sick leave law allows employees to use their accrued sick leave before they're laid off. And I read an article on the Inquirer's website today. Apparently this isn't happening. And this is probably, my guess, hopefully, is that the employers did not realize that this was a change in the temporary expansion of the act. But I read a lot of restaurant workers were laid off without being able to use their accrued sick time. So my guess is that the restaurants didn't know and they unknowingly violated it. But it is something to be aware of. I mean, it's 40 hours, so it's not, a huge amount of money, but it still matters to people who are, let go on such short notice. New Jersey actually already has a sick leave law that applies to everyone in the state. And that actually already covers public health emergencies. So there's no change there. Does anybody have any questions so far about the sick leave law?
A lot of data. It's very good though. Very precise.
It is a lot of information to try to soak in.
I have a question. If I get PTO, is sick leave included in the PTO, or is that something separate? I asked someone about that before, and they said that the sick leave is like a part of my PTO. Like if I'm sick, then I just take one of my PTO days. But how does that?
That is one of those legal questions where the answer is it depends. And it depends on what the policy is. There are some employers who already had PTO policies in place that complied with the sick leave law. So their policies were fine. There were some employers who did not, so they had to revise their policies. So it really sort of depends. And employers also have the option to front load the sick leave. So front load the 40 hours. So it really depends on what the policy is.
Okay. Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's what happens in the law again, that there's a lot of it depends.
Stephanie,
Everything's very factual.
Where would you recommend that individuals go within their organizations, their places of business, to find out what protections they have and what might be available to them in terms of this kind of support?
In terms of finding out what their employer's PTO policies are?
Yeah, exactly.
So that should be something. Not all employers have a handbook, but most of them do, especially larger employers. A lot of mom and pop, they don't have a handbook. But the handbook would be the first place where I would look. Under paid time off, sick, a lot of times now it's just grouped into paid time off, and you can use it for vacation, for sick. It's not broken up. But other policies, it'll be vacation, sick time. So that's where I would go for that.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question before you continue. For a layperson like me, are there places where I could go to learn more about the Promoting Healthy Families and Workplaces Act and the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, so that I could understand them from a layperson's perspective?
From a layperson's standpoint, I think the Families First Coronavirus Response Act may be a little difficult right now. The DOL just issued some guidance on it, so that might be an easier place to try to, to read it. It's still a little like legalese, so it's not super easy to understand.
Okay.
There are a lot of attorneys that are still like trying to figure it out.
Great, but a place like the DOL, their website would have at least kind of a study guide or something like that for someone like me. It sounds like so. Thank you for that.
I'm actually trying to find it, trying to find the link so I can maybe post it in the chat.
At our work as well, we're posting a lot of resources for our clients, and that includes like layperson's terms for these acts. So I can share that link too, because we're updating that constantly.
That would be great, and I will take it upon myself to compile anything that anybody puts in the chat. I get a record of that, like a transcript. So I'll make sure to share that with everyone once the video renders. So thank you very much. So
one thing I should add, you asked for a layperson's where to go for that, and I believe that I'm posting a Q&A, which is new. I haven't seen this. I believe that employers are required to post posters by March 25th, which is tomorrow. I haven't seen the poster yet, and I also think it could be very difficult for that to happen since most people are working remotely. So if everybody knows their break room has the posters with a bunch of legal stuff on them, and that usually breaks it down pretty easily. But I don't know how people are going to see that if nobody's at work.
Yeah, I agree.
But I am posting some links in the chat. So this is DOL guidance and a DOL Q&A. And if I find a poster, I don't think it's out yet.
I haven't seen one yet either.
Yeah, so I don't think it's out, and they have to do it by the 25th, so it has to be out soon. How about Philadelphia sick leave law? Anybody have questions about that?
No, but I did want to comment, Steph, before. You were correct about what you were saying about the tax credit. That was accurate, that it's a one-for-one and retaining tax funds.
Can you repeat that, please? What that says?
The tax credit part?
Yes, please.
So employers can, if they're paying out these types of credits, they'll get a tax credit, a one-for-one for the dollar amount. So taxes that they would typically be paying out for federal an employee Social Security and Medicaid, they can retain those as basically a reimbursement for this. So they don't actually end up paying out. So if it's $3,000 that they're covering for this Family First coronavirus response, and say that they're paying out $5,000 in taxes for the full payroll, they actually would only have to pay out $2,000 because they can retain that $3,000 that they're holding back. I'm sorry, it's confusing. I hope that makes sense. But
yeah, it's very confusing, which is why I know employers are going to screw some things up, and it's going to take a little bit of time to get everybody sorted out.
So that's another question, Stephanie. What kinds of things should employees be talking to their employers about? So we talked about kind of the first research that you can do on your own, but what kinds of conversations should employees and employers be having with each other right now?
I would say, first, if there is a need for, there are going to be a lot of people who are working remotely. So hopefully those people can keep doing, their work. But, obviously, if there's a need that arises for leave, talking to the employers about the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, talking to them about if they're in Philadelphia sick leave. But one thing that I really want to talk about is unemployment compensation, because unfortunately the reality of the situation is a lot of people's hours are going to be cut. A lot of people have already been laid off, and people need to know about unemployment compensation. If generally Pennsylvania and New Jersey are about the same. So generally if someone is out of work due to no fault of their own, so generally that means if the person did not do anything bad, violate any rules, if the person's been laid off or just hours reduced, that person's generally able to collect unemployment compensation. So that's going to come into play because there are employers who are closing, whether it's temporarily or hopefully not, but could be permanently, or people's hours are being reduced. But there are other situations where employees can collect unemployment in this situation. And that's, I think the person will be eligible if a healthcare provider or medical professional or public official orders the person to isolate or quarantine. I think as long as the person's still able to do some kind of work, they'll be able to collect. Not everybody can work remotely. So if someone's told to stay home and their job is not possible to be done remotely, then the person should be able to collect unemployment. Or, there could be employers who tell someone to stay home because they think that they're at risk of spreading or contracting the coronavirus. So those employees will likely be able to collect unemployment compensation as well. So anyone who has to self-isolate, quarantine, told to stay home, hours reduced, like those people should be able to collect. Any school employees they've been closed, that would fall into that as well. One thing that I think employees should try to do is that if they do have paid leave, so like in Philadelphia, take the paid leave and then apply for unemployment compensation. Or if they qualify under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, take that leave and then apply. That'll probably, unemployment compensation pays roughly like 50%. So the leave under those laws would likely be higher. So take the paid leave, then apply for unemployment would be something that I would be discussing with the employer too.
Stephanie, are you? Thank you for that. Are you taking questions at this point, or should we table them for?
You know what? I just want to say one thing.
Sure.
If an employer offers telework and the employee can do that work but says no, then that employee probably can apply for unemployment. And if an employee voluntarily chooses to stay home from work because of a school closure, probably cannot collect unemployment. That would go back to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And another thing that's important to point out is that usually when you apply for unemployment, you have things you have to do. sort of like homework. You have to, it's work registration and work search. That's actually been waived. So employees don't have to do that. It would be a little difficult if they're in quarantine. And an important thing for employers to know is that when an employee applies for unemployment and gets unemployment, their rating is affected by that. That's been suspended. So if an employer lets 100 people go and they all collect unemployment, it's not going to affect the employer's rate. So I can take some unemployment questions now.
Great. Jeff, who is a good friend of mine, is on the call, and he is a CPA in Illinois. He says, I've had a few business owners that want to claim unemployment on their own companies. I understand this is state by state, but what are your thoughts on this issue?
All right. So my thoughts are, it depends, and I think it depends on how the business is set up. If somebody's self-employed and they're not an employee of the company, then I think it's an absolute no. But if somebody is an employee of the company and they're paying into unemployment, I can't say this for sure, but I think that the person would be able to collect. Again, it depends on the state. But there are a lot of people who are employees of their companies. They pay into unemployment, they pay into workers' comp, they get paychecks, so they're employees of the company.
Gotcha. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Anyone else have any unemployment issues, questions? It's one of the biggest things that's affecting employees. It's been almost immediate. Restaurant workers have been affected. There's hundreds that have been let go.
Yeah, another question. What do I do if my employer violated the new law? I was laid off with no PTO paid out, but I already applied for unemployment.
So I can't give specific legal advice, but if an employer in Philadelphia violated the expanded sick leave law, there is a form. I'm getting the link right now. There's a form on the city's website where you can fill out a complaint. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Great. And for everybody who's listening, I'm compiling all of these links, so I'll make them available to everyone as well.
And that link that I put in there also just sort of has some basic information about the paid sick leave law. I don't think it has information on the temporary expansion, but it's still helpful.
Any other questions at this point? All right, Stephanie.
There's only a few other things that I wanted to touch on. One is workers' comp. Despite the fact that I'm an employment attorney, I don't do workers' comp because, believe it or not, it's actually kind of a different animal. But I can say that employees may be eligible to receive workers' comp benefits if they contract the coronavirus at work. If this happens, there's standard reporting procedures, so employees should report that, and employees may also wish to consult with a workers' comp attorney. And then I also wanted to, I mentioned earlier stay-at-home orders, and I mentioned New Jersey. And my boss tells me I have to come to work, and the state's told me I can't go to work because the business is closed. In New Jersey, I think there's a whistleblower claim there because their laws are very employee friendly. So if that happens to someone, meaning someone's fired because they refuse to report to work when the governor's ordered them to stay home, it's very possible there's a whistleblower claim. Pennsylvania laws are less employee friendly, but if this does happen to somebody, I think the person should still consult with an employment attorney because this is really rapidly changing every day. Things are a little bit different in the employment world since the coronavirus hit. So there could still be a claim there. It's something that we just sort of have to see how that plays out. And I want to talk about small businesses for a minute. This will be my last thing, and then we can have more questions. This is a little off topic, but I think it will still interest people. The City of Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation launched a small business relief fund. There's $9 million grant and zero interest loan program. If you want more information, I'm going to post the link. The SBA is also offering low interest loans. And I'm
You're
going to
talking
post
about
that
the one
link
under
too.
the PIDC?
Yes.
Okay, I was just about to ask about that.
Ah, okay. I'm posting the links right now. So that's some information for anyone who has a small business. Unfortunately, the reality is that, you know, a lot of small businesses are going to be affected. A lot of employees are going to be laid off. Hopefully, this doesn't go on for too long, but it's just a difficult time. So if anybody has any more questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. Like I said, this is sort of an ever-changing, every day something's different. So I don't know if I can answer everybody's questions, but I'll try.
You know, under the relief fund, how detailed the information you have to provide to establish losses?
I think if I recall correctly, I read that you have to provide a tax return, some financial statements, and
Right. It seems the tax returns are to establish what your annual income is, because there are different levels of relief depending on your annual income. So the first
that's right.
level is 500,000 or less, and then you're entitled to potentially a $5,000 relief. And it says a description of your loss as it pertains to COVID-19, although it doesn't say any level of detail. I'm guessing there, you know, you just have to say, well, we lost this many customers and each customer was worth X, and I guess they determine if they need more information or not.
I think you know more than I do about this. I did see in something though, my email's been blowing up every day. It's like webinars and newsletters and announcements, and I did read a little bit about it, and I do know about what that documentation, but I don't really know much about the application process.
I didn't see all the nitty gritty. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
probably more written on it. I think there's fine print. I can also.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, you're right. So I'm going to send this link since there are other people who might be interested in it. Sign tax return to confirm annual revenue, a description of the impact of COVID-19 on your business and your recovery plan. And you're right, for the small businesses, it's a $5,000 grant. So I think that you're right. That's all you have to provide.
Maybe they're just offering maximum flexibility.
Yeah.
Flexibility under this.
And then there's information about what they consider. So what I found is that they're going to consider the number of jobs that the business sustains during a normal cycle, pre-COVID-19 levels. The business demonstrates that it has lost a significant share of revenue. The business demonstrates a strong chance of remaining open post-COVID-19. The business has experienced loss of revenue from other situations in addition to COVID-19, such as recent public works projects. The business provides jobs to low-income individuals and/or is located in a zip code with high poverty. The business has operated consistently for 2 years or more. For sole proprietors, independent contractors, priority is given to those who are located in zip codes with high poverty and or those that sustain multiple subcontractors during normal business. So that link has that information. So hopefully that's helpful.
Another question from Jeff, Stephanie. If an employer doesn't want to lay off employees, but wants to continue to pay them, these are employees who cannot work from home. Can an employer keep them on the payroll and cut their pay without violating any labor laws?
Okay, hold on. Sorry, I had to change my headset.
That's okay. You want me to repeat the question?
Sure. Sorry, everybody.
No problem. If an employer doesn't want to lay off employees, but wants to continue to pay them, and these are employees who cannot work from home, can an employer keep them on the payroll and cut their pay without violating any labor laws?
So, sorry, I'm trying to connect this headset. I'm just going to turn it off. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, my headset wasn't, my backup wasn't connecting. So, Jeff, my understanding of the question, the employer wants to continue to pay employees and they can't work from home. Are the employees going to be sitting at home doing nothing?
Either that or perhaps doing some online learning to further their skills. So they're either sitting at home or they're learning online.
Okay. So as long as the employees, so the employees can get paid for sitting at home. So you only have to, employers only have to pay employees when they're actually doing work. So if the employees are doing some sort of online learning, then they should be paid for that. The problem that comes into play is whenever you have exempt employees, they generally have to be paid their salary for the entire week in which they work. So that's a problem. But when we're talking about hourly workers only have to be paid for the hours that they're actually working.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. So that answers the question. Thanks, Stephanie.
All right. And as long as the hourly workers are being paid minimum wage, no wage violation.
All right. Other questions? And also, can you do us a favor? And if you're not talking, please mute yourself because I think I hear someone typing.
Yeah, I have a question. Hey, Steph. It's Tova.
Hi.
I just want to clarify the details on the paid leave because I missed the beginning of the call. So you're saying that that's required to be paid after being laid off?
It's actually.
Well, I'm listening. Sorry.
Oh, so it's actually, I don't know if you're aware of the Philadelphia sick leave law. We covered it earlier, and Valerie's recording this, so you'll be able to go back to it. But it was temporarily expanded in response to COVID-19, and it requires employers to pay the sick leave before they're laid off.
Okay.
And
then
that's a change, and I think my guess is that a lot of employers are not aware of that.
Then just a clarifying question, because I just applied for unemployment today. That doesn't count as severance, right? I can still request that. I haven't been paid my final paycheck yet. Can I still request
the sick leave?
Can I call them?
So I can't give specific legal advice,
That's
but
fine.
I will say that sick leave is not severance pay.
Okay.
And for severance pay to affect unemployment in Pennsylvania, it has to be like, I think the number is like 21,000 or 22,000, somewhere around there. So
Unfortunately, not my problem.
there's no risk.
Great. So I will reach out to my HR department tomorrow and let them know that they owe me that money. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Stephanie?
Stephanie, when can we train jujitsu again?
You
Very
know, that's
simple, straightforward question.
That is a good question.
3 p.m.
I'm
on YouTube.
You can train with yourself all the time. Solo drills. I like
Ryan,
to
we're all going to show up to the gym, and whenever the quarantine's up, and we're all going to be like 20 pounds heavier.
yeah.
I know. But am I liable for this? Extra pounds?
No.
Oh my goodness. Well, if there are no more questions, is that true? Then I want to say thank you so much to Stephanie Mensing for educating us a little bit. Like I said, the reason that these events are happening is because hopefully people are feeling a little less isolated and now a little bit more educated. The next meeting or the next GoToMeeting is going to be this coming Thursday morning, when Dr. Jennifer Gola will be talking with us. She's a clinical psychologist, and she'll be talking with us about strategies for dealing with anxiety. So tell your friends. I'll make sure to circulate this recording. And Stephanie, if people would like to reach you for follow-up or to contract for your services, how can they reach you?
So I'll tell you my email address.
Okay.
And my phone number.
Great.
That should be enough.
Okay, thank you very much. And so wait, was there one more question? Oh, sorry, Jeff wanted to know, can you address one more time about an employer laying off employees and not having it affect their contribution rate? Is that something?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know that this is at least in Pennsylvania, that they've actually frozen that. So if an employer has to lay off a lot of employees, it's not going to affect their rates. I'm sure that other states are doing that as well. Normally, for those of you who don't know, normally whenever an employee collects unemployment, it affects the employer's contribution rates. But that's being frozen since there's, clearly going to be a lot of people and businesses impacted.
Yep. All right, Jeff says he's going to check Illinois. So I spoke too soon. Any last questions for Stephanie? Any chats?
If there are no questions, I'll just say this, since the video will be circulating. We'll be sending out some more communications on email and Facebook as well as Instagram. So anybody watching this, please look for it, and also talk to everybody you know, particularly in the school, because we have everybody's email. We think some people may fall under the radar, some people may not be looking for it, maybe it'll hit someone's spam folder, etc. So the more we can get the word out, the better, because Val, thank you for organizing these discussion interviews with various people in the school. Sure that we've got some hidden talent, and also to discuss upcoming jiu-jitsu technical sessions and videos that we'll be releasing. So we're experimenting with formats and coming up with ideas, but mainly we just need to be able to communicate to get everybody on the same page with what we're doing, and a lot of it will be happening this week. So please let everybody know who may fall through the cracks.
Thanks, Brian.
And Valerie, before we go, I have one more thing, and this is really for people who do hiring, but it might be helpful.
Sure.
Everybody who does hiring is probably aware of the verification process. The Department of Homeland Security has issued some guidance. They're allowing remote verification. So employers still have to inspect the Section 2 documents over video conference, fax, or email, and they have to obtain and retain copies within 3 days. There are some instructions. Employers are instructed to enter COVID-19 as the reason for the physical inspection delay. And then once normal operations resume, again, we don't know when that will be, any employees who were onboarded during the remote verification have to report to the employer within 3 days for in-person verification. Once those documents are physically inspected, the employer should add, quote, documents physically examined, end quote, with the date of inspection to the Section 2 additional information field. So I don't know how many people here do hiring, but that's just something that will help out. I had that come up with a client who had to onboard somebody this week. So it just popped into my head.
Thank you. So yet another example of how the situation is changing kind of even as we're speaking here. So thank you again so much for educating us, Stephanie, and maybe we can do this again in, well, I was going to joke and say a week, but maybe it would be relevant then to do it again. But thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. So
Thank you,
all right,
Stephanie and Val.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. And yeah, let's cross our fingers we can all train again soon.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.